Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at the E.R.A. Amantino or Boito 20 gauge over-under shotgun. Here we have an example of an early 70s low-end 20 gauge over-under shotgun produced by the Brazilian company E.R.A. Amantino, also known as Boito. I picked this gun up used at an area gun store about 20 years ago. It's basically been my wife and daughter's gun ever since. It shoots okay, but the braking action on this gun has always been a little stiff, and it tends to get worse the more the gun is shot. The other issue is the condition of the wood finish. Someone appears to have added varnish to the forend and stock before I bought it. It wasn't a very good job. You can see some runs and trim parts were varnished over. Over the years, the varnish has yellowed. It may not be a great gun, but I think it can be better than it is. That's the point of this video. We're going to do a review of the Boito 20 gauge over-under shotgun and see if we can do a little repair and restoration on this old gun to improve both its appearance and performance. Now, because obviously I've already finished this project through the magic of video editing, let's take a brief look at this gun after the work was completed. Yeah, I'm very happy with the outcome, and how I achieved the results is the subject of this video. But before we go any further, let's make sure this gun is cleared first. And by the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let's begin with the producer of this gun, E.R.A. Amantino, also known as Boito of Brazil. Boito is a Brazilian manufacturer founded in 1955 and well known for its double-barrel shotguns. E.R.A. Amantino or Boito shotguns were imported into the United States by FIA or Firearms Import and Export Corporation of Miami, Florida. FIA did not manufacture firearms, but rather sourced them from manufacturers around the world. It appears that Boito and CBC were Brazilian manufacturers from which FIA imported most of their shotguns. FIA filed for bankruptcy in November of 1990, and all the models were discontinued. Boito is well known for its double-barrel shotguns, marketed and distributed in the United States primarily under the Kmart and Stoeger brands. The Boito Kmart shotguns models distributed during the mid-1970s and 1980s were historically criticized by customers due to low quality. However, since 2013, E.R.A. Amantino has been the official representative of the Italian manufacturer Benelli in Brazil's market. Of course, Beretta is the holding company for Benelli, and Stoeger Industries is a subsidiary. And also note that today E.R.A. Amantino, or Boito, exports about 70% of its production to the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, and Argentina, among other countries. Boito shotguns can be found in over 24 countries all over the world. I just happen to also own a Stoeger Condor 1 12 gauge. It is clearly marked E.R.A. Amantino, Brazil, as its manufacturer. So I guess you could say it's a Boito for Stoeger, Benelli, Beretta. Whatever. Although this 20 gauge over-under may not be made of the highest quality, it is reliable, quite ruggedly built, and it does shoot straight. According to the date stamp here, this particular shotgun was produced in 1971. Not bad for a 50-year-old gun. As for specifications, this particular gun is a 28-inch 20 gauge model. The barrel and receiver are blued, and the wood is stained walnut. There is minimal etching on the receiver. The barrel is ribbed with a bead front sight and a midway pin. There may have been a bead on the pin at one time. If there was, it's missing now. The stock and forearm are adorned with nice clear and sharp checkering. The butt pad is black plastic. The gun is chambered for 2 3/4 inch shells. The barrels are supposed to be choked for cylinder and modified according to what I've read, but I measure them to be more improved, modified, and modified. There are 2 triggers. Length of pull is 14 7/8 inches. The braking lever is not ambidextrous, but there's an extractor for easy shell removal. I'm not sure if this braking lever is supposed to stay over when open on this Boito, like my other over-under shotguns, but it doesn't. This safety is here. up to fire. Weight is 7.3 pounds. When it comes to pros and cons, I'll admit I'm no shotgun expert. At best, I'm what you might call an occasional clay shooter. I like sporting clays, but I just don't spend much time at it, and if I do, it's usually with my Stoeger or Franchi 12-gauge semi-automatic. As such, I don't have a lot to offer in terms of complaints in general about the Boito shotgun, but regarding this particular gun, in addition to what I've already said about the braking action, the braking lever used to stay over when opening the action. Today, it doesn't seem to want to, requiring that I hold it over to more easily close the action. I'll check that out when I've got the gun apart later. And of course, I wish this gun had screw-in chokes for better flexibility. Still, for the money, it's not bad. 20 years ago, I paid $220 for this gun used, and I doubt that I would have any trouble getting that back if I were to sell it as is today. Are there better 20-gauge over-under shotguns out there? Oh, sure there are, and you can easily spend a lot more for one. But I look at this gun as a good old reliable tool. It may not be fancy, but it's ruggedly built and it easily gets the job done. First, I'd like to see if I can loosen up the braking action on this gun a little. Then I'd like to clean up the wood by stripping the yellowed varnish or whatever it is on this gun and trying for a nice rubbed oil finish. The good news here is that the gun functions well enough as it is. No problem if the braking action doesn't improve. The other point is that the wood isn't walnut. It's just stained walnut. So stripping the finish will provide the option of a different color if I like. The main challenge will be preserving the checkering. As I said, this is really more my wife and daughter's shotgun, so I'd love to improve its function for them as well as pretty it up a bit. I think they'd like that. This assembly is conventional over-under break action shotgun. Pull the little lever on the underside of the forearm toward the receiver and pull down. The forend drops away from the gun. The barrel is hooked into the receiver, swing it down, and you can remove it. And that's it. Well, while we're at it, reassembly is actually just the opposite. Return the barrel to the receiver and close the action. Return the forend and you're done. And that's all there is to it. Okay, I've taken a good look at the connection of the barrels to the receiver. They're really tight. In the past, I've cleaned, oil, and greased everything related to the connection. It'll be smooth for a while, but gets stiffer the more you shoot. And it's always felt a little gritty to me. This is the nature of this gun since I bought it 20 years ago. Even greased up, it just doesn't feel right. Don't get me wrong here, it's okay, but I feel it could be better. Compared to my Stoeger, the braking action on this Boito 20 gauge seems way too stiff. I think it's time for me to do something about it. By the way, while at a gun show a while back, I ran into a fellow who was trying to sell his Boito 12 gauge over-under. He said it had been a Kmart purchase. I found his shotgun had the same stiff braking action, so this issue must be inherent to Boito, but not necessarily exclusive, because I experienced the same type of stiff action on another cheap but nice looking 12 gauge over-under shotgun, not Brazilian made, at another gun show recently. I found that interesting. By the way, it's natural for a new shotgun to be a bit stiff. That's the way the manufacturers will make them, with the idea that the gun will loosen up with use. So I'd never suggest doing anything to a shotgun to loosen it up except break it in with repeated use over time. But this was a cheap used gun when I bought it 20 years ago, and after more than about probably 3,000 rounds that we've shot through it, it remains too stiff for my wife and daughter to operate comfortably. If I remove the forend, the barrels will easily drop away on their own weight. So it's the mating of the forend spacer to the receiver that seems to be where the friction is worse. Looking at the parts, the metal parts both look roughly machined. Even greased up, there's more friction than I think there should be. So I'm basically going to just polish these surfaces and see if that helps. I've cut and heated a few pieces of 1 1/4 inch PVC pipe to match the curves, and I'll use these as sanding blocks. Sanding with wet-dry 120 grit paper to start, and testing frequently. I'm taking my time to achieve the results I'm looking for. I'm looking for the braking action to loosen up enough of the barrels to begin to fall away under their own weight. Then I'll finish up with progressively finer paper to just polish the meeting areas of these parts a bit. Well, I've polished all of the contact points that I think matter here, where the forend spacer meets up with the receiver, and even where the barrel connects to the receiver. With the forend attached, I never got to the point where the barrels dropped away on their own, but it only takes a slight bit of pressure, and they do. Much, much better than it was, that's for sure. Greatly improved. But I'm not done. Next, I've removed the stock from the receiver. Since the gun's braking action seems to have become stiffer over the years that I've had it, I suspect that the mechanisms involved in cocking the hammers and pushing the extractors out may be a bit gummed up. All these parts come into play when opening or closing the action. It wouldn't hurt to clean these parts a bit. So while I'm at it, I've sprayed everything down with Remington shotgun cleaner to start. I like this product because it doesn't leave any residue. Then I sprayed everything with CLP and allowed it to sit for an hour. Finally, I sprayed everything with the preservative oil and again allowed it to sit for an hour. Okay, using a paper towel to wipe everything down, and before reassembling I've applied a bit of gun grease to the barrel and receiver contact points and reassembled. Let's try it out. Better. Okay, the barrels still don't fall open on their own when I push the lever over, and the lever still doesn't want to stay over, but the overall improvement is quite noticeable. It's a good improvement. This was well worth doing. Greased and oiled up and reassembled, I can now move on to doing something about the stock and forend. Looking closely at the stock and forend, they still look pretty good for an economy shotgun. The varnish has yellowed and the surface has an orange peel texture to it, but it's not horrible. If you remove the back plate and pistol grip cap, you can see that the wood is just stained to look like walnut. These parts might even be birch. That would have been typical on these budget guns. The checkering looks like it was done by laser. The cuts are sharp and thin, but lack the tiny pyramid peaks you often see on high-end checkering. To some extent, these should be easier to preserve. I'm going to use a paint stripper first and try to remove as much of this old finish as I can without disturbing the wood itself. Here we are with the paint stripper applied as directed, and I've wrapped the parts in cling wrap because I intend to let the stripper work overnight and I don't want the stripper to dry out. I've had the best results this way. I'll give it a day and check on it. It's a messy and tedious process, but I'm hoping that the long-term results will be worth it. After a few hours spent scraping the stripper off and doing a bit of sanding, here's what it looks like. No doubt it was a messy and tedious process to get to this point. That's why I'll often just sand the finish off when I'm restoring stocks on cheap economy models. They were never meant to be legacy firearms, and often the quality of the wood isn't even that great. So it's hard for me to justify putting a lot of work into them. Usually I'll just sand them, maybe stain them and coat them with a polyurethane. This old 410 shotgun here is a good example. It's a durable finish and it looks good. But as I said, this is my wife and daughter's gun, and now that I've had some success cleaning and loosening the parts up functionally, I'm going to take the time to put the effort in on the wood here on this shotgun. There are a lot of options out there. I could use traditional boiled linseed oil. Used correctly, it can provide excellent results. You can find a lot of videos out there on how to use it. Unfortunately, the wait time between coats can be weeks. Okay, I'll admit I just don't have that kind of patience. However, there are more modern options out there as well, and we're going to give one of those a shot on this project. Actually, my daughter gave me a bunch of Birchwood KC stock finishing products for my last birthday, so I think I should use some of them on this project. I'm not promoting any products on this video, it's just what I have. If I were trying for a high shine, I'd probably start with something like a sealer filler first to seal and fill the pores. But what I'd like eventually here is actually a nice matte finish similar to what I have on this old 410 shotgun. My wife likes its look, so that's what we're going to try for. If I wet the surface a little, you can see about what it's going to look like without the stain. I like a darker result, so we're going to use Birchwood KC Walnut Stain as directed. It's water-based, so it's kind of nice to work with. This walnut stain will only be the first step, a base coat if you will, to just darken the wood. After sitting overnight, here we are with only the walnut stain. The water-based stain has caused the grain to rise, so the surface is really rough to the touch. So I'm just going to use some steel wool to smooth it out. Okay, I'm going to apply a second stain coat, but I'm going for something different. A sort of a deep, dark, almost mahogany look, so I'm applying a rusty walnut stain next. After drying overnight, the surface is a little rough, so I'll use steel wool again to smooth it out. I'll leave the dust on the surface because I want to work it into the pores as I apply the oil. Applying true oil is best done by hand in thin amounts. Now we can see what the wood is going to look like. I'm just rubbing the oil into the wood. One thing I do like about using true oil is that it's linseed based, but it has a short drying time between coats, only 2 hours. Buffing lightly with steel wool between coats smooths the finish out. I'm going for 3 coats and we'll see how it looks. You can see the first coat got soaked in quickly. Additional coats will be applied thinly, allowing the sanding dust to be worked into the pores to obtain a smooth texture. Okay, here we are after a couple of hours of drying time, ready to buff the surface with steel wool and apply a second coat of oil. With the second coat, you can see the color improving and the oil is not being soaked into the wood as quickly. Looking nice, but we've got a ways to go. If you look closely, you can see lots of pores that are still open. I need to work at filling the pores with sanding dust as I go. The second coat of oil has dried enough for the next coat. I've decided to use some 800 wet dry sandpaper to smooth the surface and create a sort of a sanding dust slurry to help better fill the pores. I'll only lightly sand until there's no drag on the sandpaper. I can feel the smoothest surface coming along, but I may need a couple more coats of oil to get the results I like. No problem. I'll just keep applying the coats until I do. And I like the coloring that's developing. Very nice. Application time is short, but drying time is about 2 hours between coats. That's okay because I can see that the results are going to be worth it. After 7 hand-rubbed applications of oil with wet sanding in between, and here we are with the process completed and all reassembled. What do you think? What I've learned is that I probably should have started with sealer filler at the beginning. I expect it would have decreased the number for so many coats, but eventually I got there, and personally I'm very happy with the results. You'll note I left the surface glossy rather than with a matte finish. My wife says she loves this look, so I guess that's that. The checkering turned out better than I had expected, and look at the nice deep tone here. It isn't perfect, but I wasn't going for perfection. What's important is my wife loves it, especially the smoother function of this shotgun. As I understand, the True Oil product will take about a week to fully cure, so I'll set it aside for now and check on it occasionally to see how it looks as it cures. I may even put a protective wax on it later. Here's an ad for a used Boito 20 gauge over-under I found today. Same gun as this one. I can't imagine anyone paying $399. As I said earlier, Boito shotguns aren't highly valued, but almost any decent working and looking shotgun will probably be worth between $150 and $250 today. Trade-in may bring $100. This particular gun, as an over-under 20 gauge Boito, in its current condition, I'd say $200 would probably be a fair price. Now before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you that if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. This was a review and a bit of a restoration video featuring the Boito 20 gauge over-under shotgun. While the Boito shotgun was a low-end economy firearm, this 50-year-old example appears to be sturdily built and has delivered reasonable service. The braking action had begun to stiffen operationally and the poor finish was ready for a facelift. Could this old gun be improved? A bit of cleaning and polishing of contact points has improved its braking action, and the wood finish was upgraded through stripping, sanding, staining, and the application of a hand-rubbed oil finish. The oil finish has required additional monthly thin applications over the past few months, but I think it's been worth it. Does the shotgun shoot any better? Well, no, but that was never the problem anyhow. Okay, I can't say it's like a new gun, but I can honestly say that it's a far better gun functionally and visibly than it was when I bought it 20 years ago. Most importantly, my wife and daughter are impressed with it, and when it comes right down to it, that's all that matters. Any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.